Washington has admitted that some of the Kurdish forces it trains in Syria are shifting to fight against one of America's own allies. Turkey is currently on the offensive in northern Syria against groups it deems are terrorists. RT's Caleb Maupin has more on the tensions currently playing out in Syria.
U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis has confirmed that U.S. armed Kurdish forces in the SDF have been relocating to the northern parts of Syria to protect territory from Turkey.
The distraction of what is going on up in Afrin right now, which is drawing off some of the Syrian Democratic Forces. They see their fellow Kurds in Afrin under attack, so that is causing at least their attention to shift up there.
Now, the Kurds and Turkey are both key U.S. allies in the region. However, there's been tension between all three of them in recent months. Now, we've heard of how the USA has been arming the Kurdish forces and providing them with weapons. Now, Ankara has been quite upset by this action. They consider this to be the arming of terrorists. Now, at this point, we do have a statement from James Mattis confirming that he believes there are legitimate security concerns on Turkey's part about these Kurdish forces that have been armed by the United States.
We continue to work with Turkey on the areas of disagreements, which is how do we take down ISIL as rapidly as possible. They have a legitimate security concern, and we do not dismiss one bit of that.
Now, there has been escalating tension between the United States and Turkey, especially in the aftermath of an announcement from the United States that it intended to create a 30,000-strong border force to protect Syria's border with Turkey. Now, U.S. leaders backtracked from those comments, but that hasn't stopped Turkey from being quite upset by these remarks. Now, we've recently seen the beginning of Operation Olive Branch, and this is Turkish forces moving into Syria to fight against the Kurds, two allies of the United States clashing with each other in Syria. As the tensions escalate, we're even hearing calls to rename the street on which the U.S. Embassy in Turkey's capital is located. There are calls to rename the street Olive Branch after Operation Olive Branch, the Turkish operation to go into Syria and fight against the Kurdish forces armed by the United States. There seems to be quite a bit of contradiction in the words and statements of U.S. leaders, and there seems to be rising tension between all three parties, the USA, Turkey, and the Kurdish forces.
Okay, to get a little bit deeper into this, I'm happy to say that Ahmed Al-Barai, a Middle East expert, joins us live on the programme. Ahmed, you're very welcome to the programme. How do you see this now playing out? As our correspondent just described, the US is stuck, it seems, between a rock and a hard place. But is it one of their own making?
Well, the United States and Turkey do have a very contradicting relations across the past 2 terms of the presidents of the United States, starting with Barack Obama, who used to say that Turkey is their indispensable ally in the Middle East. But if you look at the policies on the ground, you would understand that there is a kind of more divergence of interest on the ground, especially when it comes to Syria and the Middle East in general. So the non-interventionist policy of the Barack Obama was a kind of a trap to Turkey, that it's going to be more embroiled in the quagmire of Syria. And later on, when Donald Trump came into power and tried to mend these kind of relations, he just followed the footsteps of his predecessor, Donald Trump, when it comes to Turkey, and he continued with the support of the YPG. Now, both presidents, they do claim that they're supporting the Kurdish militias for the pretext of fighting terrorism and Daesh, and they are the only fighting groups on the ground that is able to fight Daesh, and according to them, they succeeded. Okay. But for Turkey, this is an existential threat that they cannot abandon easily. They do believe that the YPG is still an offshoot of the PKK, that is a terrorist organization that will pose a major threat to their national security.
With what you said about Washington, bearing that in mind, can America therefore really continue to stay on the right side of both Turkey and the Kurds?
I don't think so. I think this kind of conflicting standpoints of Washington will lead eventually to a complete departure of Turkey from the orbit of the NATO and the United States, and will lead more to a closer relationship with Iran from the one hand, with Russia from the other hand, from Central Asia and Asia from the other hand, because what Washington is doing is a complete disregarding of Turkey's national interest and geopolitical interest in the region. That's something Ankara cannot easily accept.
Okay, ISIL, as you know, is no longer a military force there, but new conflicts do seem to be emerging. Like, the picture is widening. You've got Turkey, the Kurds, Syria, Israel, all involved in one way or another. Could this be the beginning of a larger scale war in the Middle East, or at least a conflict, not against a terror group?
Well, you know, the quagmire of Syria was started with a kind of proxy war, then it moved to more involvement of these regional and international powers. Now, I think that the standoff is going difficult, particularly between the United States and Turkey, basically when it comes to the Kurds in Manbij. Now, the Afrin operation, it seems that with the green light of the Russians, Turkey has the power to go ahead with the operation, the ongoing, though it's so far, it's difficult, and it seems that the Kurdish militias did have heavy weaponry, they're the guerrilla fighters, so the fight is not going so easy, though Ankara is still determined to go ahead with this operation. Now, the big elephant in the room is Manbij, and that's where the United States is still on the ground. They do have troops, and in that case, if they do not withdraw their troops and advisors from this region, then Ankara says, and repeatedly the president here threatens that he's going to go ahead with this operation in Manbij because they don't want any YPG in the west of the Euphrates River. And in case this happens, I think there will be a kind of military standoff, and that could lead to more tension, if not a military standoff between the United States and Ankara. That could lead to a major escalation, to more wars on the ground when Russia, Iran are on the same page with the Turks. That will lead to a more alienating and more isolating of the United States.
Yeah, and big ramifications from that as well. Ahmed Al-Barai, Middle East expert, always good to get your take. We appreciate it.